To today's Drawing for Adults class. This class is offered as a partnership between the Ann Arbor District Library and the Ann Arbor Art Center, both located downtown Ann Arbor, where we typically have the class at the downtown library. But for the past few months, we have been doing this class virtually through AADL TV, and I really hope you have been enjoying these series. If you have any suggestions, feel free to leave comments for some other classes that you would like to be offered in this way. My name is Payton Cook, and I hope that you enjoy the class today. We're going to be exploring transparency and reflections. So we'll be looking at one specific artist, and I'll be sharing a couple different things that I've done in the past, as well as doing a quick little demo just to get you started. It'll be more of a focus on painting, but that doesn't mean that if you don't have paints that you can't participate. You can absolutely do it with drawing as well, and some drawing materials. So first of all, I just want to say what transparent is a term I'll be using a lot. And when you see something that is transparent, basically you can see through it. So you usually will see the background or other objects behind it. And that part is going to be incredibly key because often we neglect to actually draw what's behind the object, and that's what will really help make it look transparent. So when we're trying to draw transparency, it's important to note that it's see-through, so therefore you see what's behind it. So most of the time, there's probably going to be some kind of object, even if it's just the table that we're seeing behind the object. So it's important to note that we need to include that when we are trying to draw a transparent object. Another term is reflection. So reflection is a couple different things. So reflection can be the bright spot or spots of light that can be seen on a polished, shiny object, but it can also be the image of an object or light that can be seen on the surface of another object, meaning it's reflecting, say, a ceiling fan in the glass jar on the table. Now, a refraction. This is the word that's probably not used quite as commonly, but refraction is the word that's used to describe what happens to something that's seen through glass or water. The object becomes wavy or somewhat distorted. So in these examples here, we know that a pencil obviously is not this weird, crazy sideways J looking shape. And so you can see how it has been refracted. And so that is what happens when you put something in water, in glass, and for in this example here. And the apple example, again, we know that the apple does not have this weird chunk missing out of it, and then all of a sudden there's this other little part over there that is being shown through the glass, but it's the way that it's refracted. And again, same with the green glass here at the bottom example, we can see all sorts of places where the glass behind the other glass in front does not really line up with the glass that's seen through the first glass. That's really confusing, but hopefully that makes sense to you. So things basically just become distorted. So that's important to note when you're painting or drawing something that has a lot of objects surrounding it, because those objects will often be included in it, even if it's something that's actually pretty far away, because of that refraction. So we have to keep that in mind when we're drawing or painting transparent objects. So I want to point out an artist named Janet Fish. If you're not familiar with her work, she's an American realist painter, and she's really known for these bright and colorful still lifes that she does. And everything's very realistic, and she pays particular attention to the reflective light within that transparency. And so she chooses a lot of glass and plastic, mirrors, anything that's really reflective, honestly, and it's just beautiful. So here's some examples of her work. I apologize if it's a little bit blurry. So here we can see the reflection of windows in this plastic wrap. Okay, really beautiful, incredible detail. This is a great example of our refraction of seeing that little tag on the olive oil or whatever it is that's being kind of refracted and distorted behind the bottles. Okay, now when we want to really show transparency when we're painting something like glass or plastic, whatever it is, if you are using acrylic paint, there is this technique called glazing, and you can actually buy a fluid glazing medium that you can use, and it kind of looks like what you see here in this image, and you mix a little bit of your paint with your glazing medium, and that basically just makes your paint even more transparent. But acrylic paint anyway, it's pretty transparent as it is. Acrylic paint is water-based, so you can also, in place of glazing medium, you can actually just use water and kind of thin down your paint that way and approach glazing using just simply water with your acrylic paint. Now, if you're using oils, then you would want to use your, linseed oil or liquin or something like that to kind of help thin down your paint, especially with the oils being as thick as they are. So regardless, though, it's kind of just a really thin application. If you're using watercolors, think of it like a thin wash. Now, regardless whether it's oil, acrylic, or watercolor, you would need to make sure that whatever you are glazing or washing over, make sure the layer underneath is completely dry before trying this technique out. Otherwise, you risk lifting the paint that's underneath because you're putting kind of somewhat wet paint, well, definitely wet paint, on top, and potentially it could damage what's underneath. So anyway, if you're not painting and you are planning on drawing for this exercise, just drawing or painting exercise today, that's absolutely fine. Ignore the glazing part. You won't need that at all. But the perk of glazing is you can, easily paint, let's just say, some kind of object that's maybe behind the glass. Let's say there's a candle, for example, and that is inside of a glass jar, and you can paint the glass jar, or I'm sorry, the candle just regularly, basically, and then you can use kind of this thin, watered down paint, or with glazing medium or however you're doing this, and you can make it so that you are literally making a very transparent application of paint on top. So it's really cool actually the way it can work. I'll go into detail here more now. But one of the most important things I think when you're painting or drawing glass, so I'm kind of gearing this more towards painting, but at the same time, this is absolutely still this exact same really with drawing materials. But you want to paint or draw what you see. So that's the problem when we're painting something like a transparent jar. It's really intimidating, right? I mean, absolutely, it's intimidating. You're painting this glass transparent, object that has the front of the glass, what's maybe in the glass, if there's something inside the glass, plus the back side of the glass jar, for example, and then maybe there's something else behind the glass jar. So there's a lot there. It's not just a simple solid object. So it's definitely intimidating. I am not trying to discount that whatsoever, but what happens is that our logical left brain takes over and tries to dictate what we should be painting or drawing and how it should look. And we're like, oh, we have to make sure we're painting this glass object. Let me go ahead and do this and just add a bunch of white and gray and black and all of this. And instead, we need to instead just paint what we actually see. Because what happens is we end up with this painting that doesn't really look at all like what it should be or what it's supposed to look like. So we have to really activate that right side of our brain and get rid of those, hey, let's draw what we think it looks like. And instead we just paint what's actually there. And what's best about doing this is I think it works best, and I have seen it with so many classes that I've taught with so many students, where if we separate ourselves from the fact that you're painting a glass object and instead just focus on the colors that you see, the shapes, the form, the lines, all of that, And I'm telling you, it will work. Whether you're using paint or you're using colored pencils, it doesn't matter. It's amazing if you just are like, okay, there's a weird little wavy black line. Oh, this looks kind of green. Well, draw it as you see it, and I'm telling you, it will work. So if the glass is empty, focus on each specific color. Pay close attention to all the color shifts. Start with the obvious noticeable colors, and then you can, if you're painting, you can use that glazing process to smoothly blend everything together. And then as you build that up, just keep adding more and more details as you can. Okay, so we want to focus on what the glass is reflecting, not necessarily the glass itself. I want you to focus on your light sources. Okay, where is your light coming from? Does it have multiple sources? Would it be helpful if you turned off that lamp in the corner or turned it on? Okay, tone and value are very important when drawing glass. When you're drawing in color, keep in mind that the glass will sometimes break down the light into its different spectrum bandwidths. So you might actually see red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, and violet. And so use those colors along with your highlights and shadows with your whites and blacks and gray. But I would really encourage you to look for color. Try to look for color to the point where you're like, okay, I must be losing it because I'm seeing purple and there's no purple anywhere over here. But look for it. Remember that all transparent objects are comprised of dark and light patterns and varying degrees of value. Okay, so that means you can see a variety of things going on. So we're just needing to focus on that. We also don't really have to make it look exactly what it is, reflect whatever it's actually reflecting, or drawing even the exact reflection. It's okay if it's a little off. Sometimes you can just kind of indicate, give the impression of the reflection as more of a diffused image, just drawing kind of the patterns or the highlights and shadows and not the actual picture. Being like, okay, here's kind of a blob of light blue and dark blue, rather than saying, oh, this is an entire blanket, for example, a light blue blanket that that's reflecting. And instead, just kind of focus on the colors or the patterns. Okay, and remember that you also are, painting or drawing whatever is behind the glass object. So that's really key. As I said at the beginning, making sure that you include what's behind there. And don't neglect that. You need to start off by considering what is in the background behind your object. Make sure you get those highlights, your midtones, your darks. I would recommend working in those darks first, kind of get those shadows, and then go through the highlights. But it depends on the medium sometimes. It depends on, if you're using watercolor, then you need to mark off where your highlights are going to be. You don't want to cover those up because that's kind of the nature of watercolor. And it can be similar with colored pencils, etc. So it just depends on, the materials that you're using. Okay, here's an example of the exact same still life I painted years ago with black and in black and white, and then again in color. It was an assignment actually in college, so it's definitely been a few years here, and it was a really fun assignment. It definitely challenged me because we did the black and white one first, and then we did it in color, so it kind of gave us a second try, I guess, at it, but it was a great attention to value and tone. And so you can certainly see several places where I'm off. Feel free to critique as you're looking at this. I know I can't help but do that myself, looking at it all these years later. So, but this was great to do it in black and white. So you're really focusing mostly on the tonal values and all the darks and the lights and all of that. And then you could do it again in color if you wanted. You certainly don't have to do it that way. You could also zoom in. But with all of this, it all just kind of came together because I was paying so much attention to just the angle of things. I wasn't thinking about, oh, wow, these folds in the fabric. Wow, these are really hard. I just painted what I saw. If those lines curved one way, then I did that. If they were thinner in some places, then I painted it that way. I just painted rather, exactly what I saw. Here's some other examples of some paintings of transparent objects, along with some other objects. So really focus on the highlights, the refraction, being able to see all the different colors of the objects that surround the transparent objects. You can see that within the reflections that are painted in the transparent object. Okay, so this could be a fun study to do where you're just looking at this. So you can press pause on the video and practice doing this. If you would like, here's another example. These are very Janet Fish inspired images here. But you can also, and what I would prefer for you to do is set up your own little still life of, grab a glass jar, put some things in the glass jar, or maybe make a couple different things that are around it, however you want to do it, and then practice painting or drawing it. So I'm going to do a quick demo real quick, and then you can go about this however you want. All right, so the first stages when drawing your transparent objects or painting it is going to be to just draw them. So start the drawing of your whatever your transparent object is. I do think it's great to put something inside the object if it's possible. If not, don't worry about it. Keep it simple. Don't go too elaborate here, but it is good to challenge yourself. So I chose a small little glass jar, and I just put a pencil and 2 paintbrushes in it. I also put a desk lamp right next to it so that way it has a nice strong light source to give me kind of a more dramatic lighting. So I'm just going to first sketch this out, and then I will start adding color. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and start adding color here. And what I'm doing is going ahead and building in the colors that are in the background. So I'm looking at the table that my objects here are sitting on, and that's what I'm filling in. So I want to fill in these dark brown shadows that are kind of underneath the glass jar. And then I'm just gonna start filling in the colors for the table. All right, so now that I have this, again, this really just depends on what materials you're using, but I'm gonna go ahead and start bringing out the highlights and other colors, lines, patterns, all of that I mentioned earlier when going about drawing glass or painting glass. That's really important, is just to look at what you're seeing, look at the highlights and the little designs that you see within the glass itself. So that's what I'm doing now. If you were using watercolor or colored pencils, a lot of these highlights would be things that you would need to make sure that you reserve to remain white, rather than painting on top of it, say with acrylics, where you can just paint white right on top of the other colors you're adding. Okay, so now I can go ahead and start filling in the pencil and paintbrushes that are inside of the cup here. So before I just drew right on top of those sketches and then painted around it, and I don't know what happened there with the lighting of why it shifted to being much more like warm. So I do apologize. Hopefully it'll go back to being a little bit lighter later, but anyway, as I'm doing this, I'm looking at the color shifts behind the glass of what would be sitting inside the glass versus the tool or pencil or paintbrush that's outside of the glass. I'm looking at those color shifts. Also Now, as I'm adding in the highlights and the metal part here of the paintbrush, I'm also looking at the lines that I see. I'm not paying attention to anything else. If there's any reflections of the surroundings, I'm just drawing what I see. I'm not looking at trying to figure out what the reflections are, where it's really coming from. I'm just drawing or painting what I see here. All right, so I think this is a pretty good stopping place now. Oh, my lighting is now going back to normal, so I don't know what was up with that, but that's okay. So go ahead and set up your still life. Again, just grab a transparent object of some sort, and preferably, if possible, to put something that's inside it that's solid, so that you can really look at the process of, refraction, and then also just make sure you have great light source, okay? So I hope you're able to tune in next week, and good luck with your drawing or painting as you practice drawing or painting transparency, reflections, and refractions.